The all-knowing physician hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease, and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Every age hath its own problem, and every soul its particular aspiration. The remedy the world needeth in its present day affliction can never be the same as that which a subsequent age may require. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. Baha'u'llah. No man, however acute his perception, can ever hope to reach the heights which the wisdom and understanding of the divine physician have attained. Little wonder, then, if the treatment prescribed by the physician in this day should not be found to be identical with that which he prescribed before. How could it be otherwise, when the ills affecting the sufferer necessitate at every stage of his sickness a special remedy? Baha'u'llah. Put your whole trust and confidence in God, who hath created you, and seek ye his help in all your affairs. Succor cometh from him alone. He succoureth whom he will, with the hosts of the heavens and of the earth. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. So today we're really happy to have Mr. James Elijio, and he'll be talking about humanity's natural collaboration with God. Mr. Elijio is a Garifuna educator, researcher, and writer. He is a Belizean and holder of a Master of Arts degree in Leading Innovation and Change from the York St. John's University of England. He presently works as editor of scientific, philosophical, and language theory texts. James is a declared and active Bahá'i for more than 30 years. A prolific writer, James has drafted over 40 books and thousands of poems. Among his published books is We Are With You at All Times, published by George Ronald of England. James's current and recent literary work revolves around developing coherent mindset systems. In this connection, James self-published Garifuna Mental Model, Foundations of Cross-Cultural Harmony and Collaboration in December 2024. Subsequent to serving as one of the conveners and main facilitators of the first International Garifuna Women's Conference in November 2020, James has been researching, writing, and conducting voluntary community service to enhance consciousness of the spiritual foundations and history of cultures and nations. James presently lives in Lithuania with his wife Iced and his two daughters, Philippa and Burnett, and his granddaughter Ariel. So with that, I'd love to hand it off to Mr. Elijio.
Thanks very much, Pemane. I would like to welcome all on the call, and based upon the nature or the theme that we'll be presenting on today, I would like to start off with two Bahá'í quotations. The first is, if you desire with all your heart friendship with every race on earth, your thoughts, spiritual and positive, will spread. It will become the desire of others, growing stronger and stronger until it reaches the minds of all men. And the next quotation has to do with universal peace. There is not one soul in this day whose conscience does not testify that there is no more important matter in this day than that of universal peace. These two quotations remind us of a statement that Baha'u'llah made when he said that true peace and tranquility can only be attained when every human soul becomes the well-wisher of all mankind. And again, based upon the fact that parents have much to do with the evolution of humanity, I would like to dedicate this sharing to my ascended parents and to all current and future parents. And the reason for this is that within the Baha'i context, parents are actually trustees of God who are particularly responsible for the proper and complete education of their children. Now, we know that the parents generally know that raising children is not the easiest of tasks, especially in our own time when definitely parents know that there are many distractions. Nonetheless, when we look into the cause of God, we get to realize that there is much assistance for parents to be able to fulfill their purpose. And one major aspect of that is actually the eternal covenant of God. There are 3 points regarding the eternal covenant of God that I would like to make. One have to do with what is referred to within the Islamic teaching as the Day of the Covenant. And then we'll get into exploring progressive revelation. And then we'll be speaking about that power that the Baha'i writings indicate vibrates within the innermost being of all created things. So in regards to the Day of the Covenant, this is an allegory bearing on the fact that when we speak about the covenant, it may not be exact to say the covenant of God, because again, when we take into consideration that the human soul is a natural lover of God, when we speak about the eternal covenant of God, certainly there are two sides. One part having to do with our own soul, and the other that of God. And generally there is the understanding that a covenant is basically an agreement between two parties. So on the Day of the Covenant, based upon Islamic teachings, it has to do with the day when God addressed the posterity of Adam. And it is mentioned that God said, "Am I not your Lord?" And all souls answered, "Yea, and we verily bear witness." Now, really reflecting upon the Day of the Covenant is something that is very significant, because it really has to do with helping us to understand that in the last analysis, humanity on a whole is inclined towards firmness in the covenant. And we have support for that, in the sense that, as Abdul Baha says, that all the forces of the universe in the last analysis serve the covenant. And I'm sure that parents would agree that once the children learn about the covenant, the eternal covenant, as early as possible, it means that they will be more inclined to harmony with their own soul. The next point regarding the covenant that I would like to speak of, as I mentioned, is progressive revelation. As I mentioned, because of the nature of raising children, it's also very important that children as early as possible become aware of this principle. And progressive revelation has to do with the understanding that God provides humanity with the education that it needs so that it can carry forward civilization. Now, we know that in the Baha'i writings, it's also mentioned very clearly that human beings are actually created to carry forward an ever advancing civilization. And it also indicates, the writings also indicates that humanity has actually gone through a number of different stages in regards to human evolution: family unity, tribal unity, city-state establishment, nation building, and from the middle of the 19th century, we entered the phase of world unity. In each one of these phases of humanity's evolution, parents played a very significant role. And what is indicated by spiritual history and the development of cultures is that the more parents paid keen attention to applying the terms or teachings of the revelation of the age in which they lived, life was easier for the family, and which means that life became easier for each member within that family, and that family was able to contribute to the advancement of the community in which it lives. Now, in regards to the timeline related to progressive revelation, we know that, Christ came about 2,000 years ago, and 600 years after the coming of Christ, we had the coming of Prophet Muhammad. And the Baha'i faith was born actually about 1,200 years after the coming of Prophet Muhammad. Now, in light of the covenant as it relates to our own time, and this is very, very significant, that in our own time, it was a manifestation of God himself who actually spoke about the coming of Baha'u'llah. So in this age, we actually have twin manifestations. So the Bab, and the Baha'u'llah. And again, in connection to the significance of the time in which we live, we also have two interpreters, two divinely ordained interpreters. So that's Abdul Baha and the Shoghi Effendi. In addition to the two interpreters we also have a divinely ordained institution that is responsible for the elucidation of the teachings of Baha'u'llah. So considering all this, we can see how significant the time is that we are living in. And connected to that is to say that in the plan of God, there are two major eras: the era of prophecy and the era of fulfillment. So up to the Bab, we have the era of prophecy. So the Bab actually closed the prophetic cycle, and at the same time, he opened the era of fulfillment. And so something that is very good for all to keep in mind, and I would like to say, given my desire to stress in regards to parents, is that we are no more living in the age of training. We are now living in the age when the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth has begun. And so it's very good that each individual thinks about what is it that he or she would like to contribute to the rising kingdom of God on earth. The third point I want to highlight in regards to the covenant is the mystery of eternal might, which vibrates within the innermost being of all created things, including the human soul. Now, this power is very, very significant. And the reason for that is that it is operating through each one of us. And again, the operation of the mystery of eternal might within us is based upon the principle that God does not burden a soul beyond its capacity. So that power, the way that the Baha'i writings, deal with it, it says that that is the power that is essentially responsible for the progress and the victory of the cause of God. And so in the last analysis, really, each human being is an embodiment of the mystery of eternal might. Each human being is the embodiment of that force that is at this very time shaping the course of human society. And Baha'u'llah speaks very openly regarding this force. In the writings, it clearly indicates that when Baha'u'llah says that the world's equilibrium had been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order, he was certainly making reference to the operation of the mystery of eternal might. I would just like to indicate from a historical perspective that Leo Tolstoy, a quite well-known novelist, at least in time past, he mentioned that we keep seeking the mystery of the universe, but that Baha'u'llah had the key for the appreciation of that mystery. So really, in regards to, again, parenting, it is very good that we keep in mind that force, that mystery of eternal might, because when we harmonize with that force, it means that we are harmonizing with our true reality. And it's very interesting also that Baha'u'llah in his writings mentioned that really one of the desires of God is to lay bare our inmost reality. And so the appreciation of the mystery of eternal might is very, very significant. Now, when we think about also, when we reflect on the mystery of eternal might, we come to the realization that we're actually dealing with a power which is more of a confluence of both science and religion. Presently, there is much effort that is being made to reconcile the four forces that are indicated by science as the four fundamental forces. That's gravity, electromagnetism, and the weak and the strong atomic force. Now, this in itself, if we take a close look at it, it indicates something that Baha'u'llah says, and that is that the degree of love or the interest, the attraction that humanity has, to reconnect with God, that a part of it will be reflected in what he describes as seeking God in the dust. So this direction that science is presently taking is actually that direction that's supposed to lead onto the merging, the convergence of knowledge in such a manner that the harmony of science and religion is appreciated. And again, this is something that is very good for parents to be very much aware of, this principle of the harmony of science and religion. Before I go further, what I would like to do is to highlight a few points. The first having to do with this understanding that human souls are inhabitants of both earth and heaven at the same time. And this is a topic that can become very wide in terms of scope, but something that can, a statement that can assist us in terms of appreciating our, well, the reality of man inhabiting both heaven and earth at the same time is Abdu'l-Baha saying that yes, for the human soul, earth and heaven are one because it makes discoveries in both worlds. So in that part, from that particular perspective, I think it's very important, you know, that parents keep this in mind also, and so that they do not just look at their children as just a being that is confined to the material realm. And something to that God has actually ordained, and so that we can get a gist of this understanding that we inhabit also heaven whilst we are on earth, is the dream phenomenon. And Abdu'l-Baha goes, both Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah make reference to this fact that in the dream, we do all kinds of things there. We might be eating or meeting people or talking, but we know that it's not our physical body that is involved in the dream. And Baha'u'llah plainly says that this is a sign, you know, that God has ordained for human beings to appreciate that, yes, they are not, you know, just merely earthbound. And this particular concept of us inhabiting, being an inhabitant, our soul being an inhabitant of the heaven, is very significant also in regards to civilization, the process of civilization, because on our own, we cannot carry out civilization without divine aid. When we look very closely at human civilization, it's basically a process of drawing wisdom from the spiritual realm to apply in the social realm. And it also has to do with this concept of the convergence of mindsets. And in this connection, it's very rather relevant, you know, to make reference to the different intellectual elements of each revelation. So each revelation consists of knowledge, vision, virtues, mission, counsels, principles, laws. And you know, as we get to be exposed, to these different elements, it helps us to develop the kind of mindset that can allow us to more effectively, let's say, download, you know, realities from the invisible world to bring it into the social or physical dimension. So yes, this point about our soul navigating both earth and heaven at the same time and not being limited to earth is very, very important in terms of us operating or collaborating with God. The next point that is rather relevant to highlight, and again, we have spoken about it, you know, has to do with our first allegiance being an allegiance to God. And again, this is something that Baha'u'llah speaks about rather plainly. Baha'u'llah mentions that the human soul is the first amongst all created things to bow down before God. So this is a concept that is very, very important, and in many ways, it makes it a little bit easier for human beings, to really progress on the path of God with much confidence, because we get to realize that we are spiritual beings, and we are endowed with this natural love for our Creator. The next point have to do with the modes of faith, by which human beings operate. And before I mention, those modes of faith, which are basically two, it's relevant to say that every human being has faith in God, every human being. And Baha'u'llah bears witness to this when he says, "Some know us and bear witness, whilst the majority bear witness, yet know us not." Now, before I get into speaking a little bit more about this statement of Baha'u'llah, it's also rather worthy to make reference to this statement that the Bab made in one of his prayers. In one of his prayers, the Bab says that, in making reference to human souls, he says, "All are his servants, and all abide by his bidding." And we know this comes back to this very point, that all the forces of the universe in the last analysis serve the covenant. That is, including that force that vibrates within our very soul. And so, coming back to this statement of Baha'u'llah, that some know us and bear witness, whilst the majority bear witness, yet know us not. The first part of that statement, "some know us and bear witness," this basically has to do with those souls that have actually investigated the cause of God, those souls that have actually turned with consciousness, towards the cause of God, and they're carrying out the will of God on the basis of choice. Now, that has to do with what the Baha'i writings refer to as objective faith. So, and the one statement that Abdul Baha made regarding objective faith, that in any age, it's usually a little bit compared to the other kind of faith, which is subjective faith. Yeah, but certainly in this age of human maturity, objective faith is to certainly grow and develop and become predominant. And as we mentioned, objective faith has to do with conscious faith in God. Subjective faith is actually carrying out, it's associated with carrying out the will of God, but not intentionally. It's many times it's based upon circumstances that we find ourselves in, and we carry out maybe certain decisions that aligns with the will of God, but when we look closely at it, it's mainly on the basis of a kind of chance, or maybe, let's say, rational situation. It's not based upon the fact that, we love God consciously, but it's based upon our divine nature. Now, so subjective faith is not the kind of faith with which the human being is destined to operate on. Subjective faith can best be seen as a head start for us in this world. Because as we know, the human mind basically learns progressively. And so we know that, for example, in children, we might see signs of selfishness, the signs of qualities that can appear rather blameworthy. But nonetheless, that child is also impacted, by the operation of the mystery of eternal might, the covenant. But again, the child is not aware of these things. And so it becomes rather crucial that parents, as much as possible, reflect the kind of lifestyle that is best, for the human soul. And we'll be getting into details regarding that rather shortly. The next point that is rather relevant in regards to natural collaboration with God has to do with the ongoing conversation that is taking place, that has been taking place and will forever take place between God and humanity. Now, we had made reference to progressive revelation. So the coming of the manifestations of God certainly marks a very significant point in the ongoing conversation between God and humanity. And when we study the various revelations, we get to realize that a subsequent one would actually address certain questions or certain things that might not have been clear in the previous revelation. And so we then, by way of that, noticing what a subsequent revelation deals with, and comparing that with what the previous revelation is, we can see that the kind of conversation that God is having with humanity is really progressive. And that just as one of the readings that we had in the in the devotional part in this program, it makes reference to the fact that God has his hands on the pulse of humanity. And so each revelation, the coming of each one of the manifestations of God, certainly marks a very significant point in that ongoing conversation. Now, the conversation doesn't stop. The conversation doesn't stop with the manifestation of God basically proceeding into the spiritual realm. There is always conversation taking place between humanity and God. And let's mention a few of these. One of it has to do with thinking. Abdu'l-Baha indicates that when a human being thinks, he is actually communicating with his spirit. And and when we communicate with our spirit, there is generally support from God, because we are making we are actually directing questions or maybe concerns in essence to the spiritual realm. And so our spirits in that regard serve as a kind of intermediary. And even in one particular case, Abdu'l-Baha mentioned that we are to yield to our higher self. We are to yield to our spirit. And so the more we think, but realize that thinking is one of the ways of communicating with God, there is a lot more that we may be able to get by way of our thinking. Another manner of communication with God is by way of reflection. And Baha'u'llah himself actually mentioned that the source of crafts sciences and arts is the power of reflection. So again, this is a means of the ongoing conversation that is taking place between humanity and God, and a way by which we draw things or knowledge from the spiritual realm, and so that we can apply it within the social realm. Another means of communication with God is meditation. And again, Abdu'l-Baha makes clear in this regard that it is an axiomatic fact that when we meditate, that we are actually speaking with our spirit. And during that time, we also get the support of God. In a statement Abdu'l-Baha made regarding meditation, he actually says that meditation is the key to the door of mysteries. And he says that by way of meditation, man gets in touch with God. The typical and the direct way of communication with God is prayer. And Abdu'l-Baha describes prayer as communication with God. Now, again, when we think about this ongoing conversation with God, we can see the basis. We come to recognize that this ongoing conversation is the basis of what we may refer to as a mindset system convergence. Because as rational beings interact, maybe just as a general principle, as rational beings communicate, have conversations, there is a kind of mindset system merging that get to take place. Now, in regards to that ongoing conversation between God and humanity, and particularly when we talk about mindset, it is maybe easier to think about the manifestations of God in this sense. So what happens is that there more and more, by way of progressive revelation, there is a progressive process of mindset convergence. Humanity's mindset merging with the mindset of the manifestations of God. And it's really wonderful that Baha'u'llah makes this point very clear, that the beginning of all things is the knowledge of God, and the end of all things basically has to do with strict obedience to whatever has come from God to humanity. And so when we look at the way that the world is actually progressing, for example, we can see reflection of these basic principles of the Baha'i faith, for example, the equality between men and women, and also the harmony of science and religion. Because of the great importance of the home in connection to this, to nurturing this natural collaboration with God, I would like to just highlight a few points. There is a lot to the home, but I would like to take a look at the aspects related to the head of the home, the qualities of the home, education within the home, and also the division of responsibilities within the home. And this is basically for us to get to appreciate this living, the soul basically being an inhabitant, we can say an inhabitant of earth and heaven at the same time. So within the home of God, certainly God is the head. In a typical home, a home within the social realm, the head of the home basically is the combination of the husband and the wife. So they basically operate as one unit. So husband and wife as one unit constitute the head of the home. And that point is very important because if there isn't this harmonious relationship between husband and wife, based upon the covenant of God or the will of God, to bring into reality a peaceful, joyful world, that situation between the husband and wife will become reflected in the condition of the children. And certainly parents do not want to, they certainly want the best for their children, and they do not want to pass down weaknesses to children, or weaknesses based upon maybe challenges that that both maybe husband and wife may have between themselves. And so that how the husband and wife operate need to very much reflect the love of God. And it's very good that Abdul Baha also says that that the object of all human attainment is the love of God. And so once the husband and wife maintain this in mind, it means that the children, they will grow up with this awareness that the love of God is of utmost importance. So in regards to the qualities of the home, this is also very, very important, especially when we consider that virtues are both the seeds and the fruits of human civilization. And so as much as possible, the home, get to reflect all these virtues that actually characterize the soul. And so when we think about, let's say, the divine edifice, let's say the home of God, we can certainly, or let's say heaven, we know that heaven is only associated with goodness. But it's also very good to have in mind that heaven is, well, this is one of the perspectives of heaven, that heaven is not a place, but a state of consciousness. And I think that state of consciousness has to do with the fact that, well, if acknowledging that the human soul is not merely, it's not confined to the social realm. So it freely moves between the spiritual realm and the social or physical realm. And so, there is also indication that the human soul certainly prefers, in some ways, again, this is another perspective, the Bab says that paradise is desired by men. Well, when we say men, it certainly doesn't we're making reference to using that term as a generic. Yeah, it's a generic term making reference to humanity on a whole, that all humanity basically desires paradise. And so again, by way of this statement that the Bab made, what we are trying to do on earth is as much as possible to build a social reality that is very much reflective of life that is associated with the divine realm. And so once parents keep this in mind also, they do their best to ensure that there is peace, joy within the home. And in terms of the education of children, within the home of God, I think this point is what I would like to particularly highlight here, is that within the home of God, which is, again, the universe on a whole, all creation, every created thing is a book of God. And Baha'u'llah makes this very plain, that every created thing is a book of God. So the atom, starting from, the mystery of eternal might, the atom, subatomic particles, all of these, these are books of God. All of everything that actually exists carries the knowledge of God. And so when we consider these, the progress, not only within religion, but also within science, we know that, all the truths that science get to provide us, it's actually the knowledge of God that was, generally knowledge that was embodied, within the various elements or aspects of the universe. So in this sense, I would like to highlight that the books of God are basically of two types. And one have to do with, yes, the revelation. So when we talk about the holy books, these definitely are containers of or carriers of the knowledge of God. And these are the books that are generally recognized as books connected to the knowledge of God. But Baha'u'llah raises our conception regarding the books of God by clearly indicating that every created thing is a book of God, including the human soul. So we have embodied books, so basically, that make up nature, and we have revealed books, or what we call the written word, the word of God. So these two sets of books, they are the primary sources of knowledge for all humanity. And there's a very significant statement that Baha'u'llah made in this regard, basically saying that the source of all knowledge is the knowledge of God, and that this knowledge can only be accessed by way of the manifestation of God. And so certainly in the future, there will be a lot more direct interaction between scientists and the knowledge and the manifestation of God, and so that the harmony of science and religion be clearly established. And as we mentioned, there is already movement in that direction, because we at this time, there is awareness regarding 4 fundamental forces, and science has not yet embraced, the mystery of eternal might. But that will take place. Scientists may have a different name for it, but the word of God for this day has already made reference to that force from which all other forces arise. The mystery of eternal might, and the fact that all those forces serve the covenant. Now, in terms of the division of responsibilities within the home, we know that we know this statement was made by Abdul Bahá'i, that each human creature has individual endowment, power, and responsibility in the creative plan of God. And so we have been stressing a lot on the responsibility of parents as basically builders of homes that from where, you know, the word of God, or the mind, the knowledge of God, the vision of God, the virtues of God, all the intellectual elements of divine revelation is actually channeled. And so the home, you know, from the based upon the perspective of the cause of God, is a sacred place. It's a sacred place, you know, that is there to facilitate, you know, the growth and development of the children in a manner that they come to fulfill what Baha'u'llah indicates, you know, that you know, that the children are brought into being to serve the cause of God, to serve the betterment of humanity, you know, to carry forward ever advancing civilization. And so within the divine realm, we know that again, there are different stations, and these different stations are associated with different responsibilities. So for example, when we speak about the manifestation of God, the manifestation of God is that point towards which all humanity are to turn, and really not only on the basis of subjective faith, but also not, you know, objective faith, you know, that we remain really properly oriented in the way that God would like us to always be oriented. And that is unto the manifestation of God himself. And the manifestation of God, you know, allows us access, you know, to the kind of knowledge, you know, the vision and everything that we need to know in the age in which we live. And again, we are living at a time, at a very significant age, because Baha'u'llah mentioned that this is the day that shall not be followed by night. And again, this statement is very much connected to the understanding that based upon the operation of the power of the covenant in this age, at this stage, in this era, which is the era of fulfillment, what had happened in the past, and that have to do with the confusion, the disunity that all, you know, got to take place as a result of the interpretation, or let's say misinterpretation, of the words of God. That is not, they are safeguards. They are safeguards in this day, in this age, you know, this stage of human maturity, to avoid that. And the Baha'i writings clearly indicate that the power of the covenant has much to do with that. The fact that Baha'u'llah did not only talk about the covenant, but that there is a written document by Baha'u'llah carrying his seal, which clearly indicated who would be his successor, you know, after he passes on, you know, into the spiritual realm. And that document made very clear reference to Abdul Baha. And as we made reference earlier to Shoghi Effendi as one of the interpreters, Abdul Baha was given the authority to appoint the guardian of the Baha'i faith. So it's rather very significant, you know, that we keep in mind these conditions of, you know, what is that kind of home that we can actually relate to as it, you know, in connection to the divine realm. and as it relates to the social realm. And what I would like to stress again is to indicate that the process of civilization that we are going through has to do with the fact that, yes, we are drawing on everything, all this knowledge, the revelation, the knowledge of God, the inspiration of God. All of this is being, in a way, downloaded, and so that we can actually develop the kingdom of God on earth, for which Christ himself prayed when he said, "Let thy kingdom come, let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." He was certainly making reference again to this downloading of things from the spiritual realm into the social, physical realm. And in our own time, it's really wonderful that the elucidator of the Baha'i writings, the Universal House of Justice, and an institution that has been referred to as the last refuge of a tottering civilization, in one of its letters to the Baha'i world, this is in 2007, 25th March 2007 letter, the House of Justice made a very powerful statement where it says, that the world order of Baha'u'llah is the divinely ordained system for which nations and people so desperately search. Now, I would like to get a little bit more specific about the Baha'i home, and what actually contributes, to creating a Baha'i home. Because, Abdul Baha is actually ordained by Baha'u'llah as the exemplar. Well, not only, in addition to Abdul Baha being one of the two interpreters of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, primarily Baha'is regard Abdul Baha as the center of Baha'u'llah's covenant. So for us to really appreciate everything regarding the will of Baha'u'llah, we really need to go through Abdul Baha. So that in itself also reflects another of the references used for Abdul Baha as the exemplar of every Baha'i virtue. And in connection to Abdul Baha serving, as also a builder of home, this statement that I'm going to share is really very significant. And again, having this in mind that when we speak about a Baha'i home, we are actually speaking about a reality that is really divine. So here it goes. Abdul Baha says, "My home is the home of peace. My home is the home of joy and delight. My home is the home of laughter and exultation. Whosoever enters through the portals of this home must go out with gladsome heart. This is the home of light. Whosoever enters here must become illumined." So we can see very clearly, and again, I would just like to make reference to this point, that Abdul Baha saying, that basically every soul living in this age recognizes that universal peace is of utmost importance, universal peace. And again, certainly there are efforts, towards universal peace. We can see this around the world. We know that the United Nations, for example, as an institution was created, for the establishment of peace, basically in the world. And certainly joy. Abdul Baha says that joy gives us wings. He says that whenever we are joyful, our intellect is sharper. And certainly everything about us certainly works better. And in another case, Abdul Baha indicates that a joyful person will find it very difficult to hurt another person. And again, just to indicate, that the natural orientation of the soul is firmness in the covenant, given the fact that, this force that vibrates within the soul, is that force that is responsible, for the progress and the victory of the cause of God. Each one of us is an embodiment of that force. And it goes to such an extent that, when Baha'u'llah actually says, turn thy sight unto thyself, that thou mayest find me standing within the mighty, powerful, and self-subsisting, we certainly know that there is indication there regarding the mystery of eternal might. We are embodiments of that force. And again, illumination, in terms of when we take a look, at the cause of God, we get to realize that it's very much a focus upon education. And again, education is something that is very, very important that parents pay keen attention to. At the outset, we mentioned that based upon the Baha'i teachings, parents are trustees to ensure the proper and the complete education of their children. So considering all these conditions, that are to characterize the home, we know that it actually takes, a significant preparation, for parents to be able to fulfill their sacred role, and children to be able to also carry on with the learning that they are to carry on with, and live the kind of life that can alone bring them happiness. Because, again, Abdul Baha says that human happiness is founded upon spiritual behavior. So in terms of, so there is a lot that can be shared. There's a lot that can be shared in regards to helping the world to go forward. But because the home, the family, is so significant in regards to the evolution of humanity, it is very, very important that parents to-be are given maximum support, and so that humanity can move in the direction that it so desires. And again, having in mind, that in the last analysis, we are lovers of God. Baha'u'llah says, I have breathed a breath of my own spirit within thee, that thou mayest be my lover. So for us to be firm in the covenant, for us to really fulfill the natural desire that we have to collaborate with God, to actually build a social reality that reflects what we tend to associate with heaven, spiritual preparation is definitely important. And there is a lot to it, but I would like to share with you these, what I refer to as requisites of spiritual growth. Because again, when we think about it rather clearly, we get to see that these requisites, and even Bahá'i, the House of Justice makes plain that these requisites actually address how do we develop true spirituality. And we will see, that these requisites, they very much reflect the different kinds of ways that humanity holds conversation with God. And we come to understand that, yes, it's very important that we be aware of these different kinds of modes of conversation with God in addition to prayer. So allow me to share this. And this is from the Universal House of Justice in a letter written 1st September 1983. It says, Baha'u'llah has stated quite clearly in his writings the essential requisites for our spiritual growth. And these are stressed again and again by Abdul Baha in his talks and tablets. One can summarize them briefly in this way. Recital each day of one of the obligatory prayers with pure-hearted devotion. 2, the regular reading of the sacred scriptures, specifically at least each morning and evening with reverence, attention, and thought. 3, prayerful meditation on the teachings so that we may understand them more deeply, fulfill them more faithfully, and convey them more accurately to others. 4, striving every day to bring our behavior more into accordance with the high standards that are set forth in the teachings. 5, teaching the cause of God. 6, selfless service in the work of the cause and in carrying on of our trade or profession. So really, we can see the kind of assistance that the Universal House of Justice offers in regards to this process of, not only helping the families, but the entire world, to be able to progress and to evolve with the greatest ease. Because one thing can be said, when we consider, the challenges, when we consider the challenges that humanity may be going through in any given context, we may find that one or more of these requisites of spiritual growth, missing. And to such an extent, I would just like to indicate that in the last analysis, the educational program that the manifestations of God facilitate, it's fitting to mention that it's virtue-based. It's based upon what are generally referred to as human values. And to the extent, that the House of Justice indicates that in the process of decision making, it is helpful and strategic, for world leaders to first consider what are those spiritual principles or virtues or human values that are involved, and on the basis of that awareness, find or make the decisions that can be sustainable. So keeping in mind that human civilization, true human civilization is based upon a mindset system that is virtue-based, a mindset system that gives keen attention to human values and spiritual principles. And the same applies to parents, when in terms of effective homemaking, that it is kept in mind, that the application of virtues is very, very important in all cases, especially when it comes to solving challenges that may arise within the home. And possibly at this point, friends, I would like to welcome your questions. And I certainly do look forward to this part, because my preference is generally, to have a conversation. So it will be very good for us to open up for questions at this point. And I really thank you for your being here. And yeah, let's proceed with questions.
Thank you so much for that talk. Yeah, so if people have questions, you can put it in the chat right now.
Possibly while we wait, I can make reference to, I would like to make reference to a point that would be very good for us to also keep in mind as it relates to being inhabitants of the spiritual realm. Abdu'l-Baha, certainly in his effort to let us know that we are never away from God, and that God is always with us and we are always with him, he makes reference to God containing all. He says, God contains all. And followed by that, he says that that which contains is superior. And I think that it's very good that we have this in mind, because once we see ourselves always contained by God, it means that our mindset system more increasingly harmonizes with the revelation-based mindset system. And so Abdu'l-Baha indicates that if that in connection to God containing us, we can think about concentric circles, for example. So the largest circle represents God. The second, so the second circle, second to the only to the largest, that represents the manifestation of God. And then we have the circle representing humanity. And then we have the circle representing animals, plants, minerals. So when we consider this model, it's then that it helps us, to orient ourselves more and more spiritually, because it helps us to see something that the manifestations of God also help us to recognize, that yes, God is omnipresent, and so it is impossible. It is logically, absolutely impossible for for a human being, for a soul to be outside of the presence of God. It is absolutely impossible. And so all these teachings that we are actually given, all these teachings that we are given is to really, in the last analysis, help us to understand that God always lives with us and we're always with him. And again, Baha'u'llah says, we are with you at all times and shall strengthen you through the power of truth. There might be questions already, Pamani?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. One is, you spoke about parents' role. What about those people who don't have children?
Okay, very good. So for, people who do not have children, the purpose of life remains the same, so one of the things that Baha'u'llah tells us is that man was created to carry forward an ever advancing civilization, and so when that term man, generic, it has to do with all humanity. Something that is rather relevant that I mentioned here. Why is it that I stress a lot? Why I stress a lot on parents is because, again, that is a strategic institution. It's a very strategic institution amongst all institutions in the world and in human experience. And so it means that, once we give adequate attention, to the strengthening of the family, it means that society will have great benefit from that. So in terms of an individual that does not have family, the purpose of life basically remains the same, and that individual can certainly make effort in regards to supporting families. So it could be a male, female, a man, a woman, without not having children. The responsibility that we have for society to make it better remains. And this is essentially, yes, the divine responsibility of each person. And again, as Abdul Baha says, that each human creature has individual endowment, power, and responsibility in the creative plan of God. But nonetheless, really, we need to be very strategic in regards to how do we address the growth and development of humanity on a whole. And it's for that reason that at this very point, that I focus a lot on the family and the role of parents. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is, how can we distinguish between our own will and God's will when striving to collaborate with him?
Oh, wonderful. I like that. Okay. I believe that what is important in regards to recognizing that difference, what is our will and what is God's will, it might not always be easy, but I think the path that needs to be taken in regards to, let's say, increasing the tendency of actually harmonizing with the will of God has to do with what we call deepening. And deepening has to do with like this call of Baha'u'llah, when he says, immerse yourselves in the ocean of my words, that ye may unravel its secrets and discover all the pearls of wisdom that lie hidden within its depths. So as we interact with the revelation, what happens is that again, these different we harmonize our mindset system, which means the knowledge that we have, our vision, the virtues that we practice, the mission we set for ourselves, the counsels we give others, all these things, the principles that we that guide our life, all these things, they more and more come to merge. They get to reflect the revelation. And it's for this reason also that Baha'u'llah let us understand that by way of interacting with the revelation, that we get to develop a new eye, a new ear, so the transformation get to take place. And again, it's based upon this principle that when rational, conscious beings interact, what happens is that, there is a convergence that get to take place. And so we can see this, we can also see this from a global perspective, that as humanity evolves, and keep evolving, what we will witness is that even in the Bible, it speaks about this, that the knowledge of the glory of God shall fill the earth as the salt fills the sea. And this is the thing that we all as human beings need to make effort towards. And so another thing that can help in regards to increasing the possibility that, yes, we carry on based upon the will of God is this statement of Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha says that man must live in a state of prayer. And we know that prayer is conversation with God. And so it's very good that it's rather helpful that we do not, that we try to reflect before making a decision, that we do not, just hastily act in anything, but to really think about, okay, for example, what we can ask ourselves, what would Baha'u'llah do in this situation? What would Abdul Baha do? What are the principles that are involved? And in this connection, it's rather relevant to even speak about the Universal House of Justice, for example. All the decisions that the Universal House of Justice gets to make are based upon exhaustive references, to the revelation. And it's very good that Shoghi Effendi, as guardian of the faith, he had left so much, to help the Universal House of Justice to operate with, and so even though from a spiritual perspective, we understand that the Universal House of Justice is basically under the protection of Baha'u'llah, under the protection of the Bab, and that it is that its decision is inspired by the Holy Spirit. There is a practical side to it, that there's an entire department. There's an entire department at the Baha'i World Center, the Secretariat, that has that major responsibility to support the Universal House of Justice in making its decisions, and that is based on going back to the Word. So again, we can never ever, as human beings, just human beings, to say that, yes, I am 100% that this decision that I'm making is the will of God, except that it is based upon the Word, which is direct, or coming from the Universal House of Justice. But on our own, it's very helpful to really deepen as much as we can. And one last thing I would like to say in this regard is that Shoghi Effendi, for this reason, Shoghi Effendi says that the very first thing that a believer is to do is to deepen, to become firm in the covenant. No? I trust that that helps.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. It looks like we're out of time, but we really appreciate the time you spent today and your talk. It was really great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And well, maybe just something I'm going to mention that I know that the last time there were a couple friends that asked for my address, or contact information. Maybe what I'll do is to just write it here, if that will be okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, you can put it in the
Right.
chat for everyone that wants it.
Very good. Thank you.
Great.
Mhm.
So I've put the link to our mailing list and our YouTube channel also in the chat if you're not already subscribed. And our speaker next week will be Dr. Haida Sabet, and her topic is change, the one thing we can depend on, insights from the Baha'i writings. So these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern time. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Mhm.